I know, so
I'm just volunteering, so yeah, no. Friendly greeter. We got little refreshments.
Oh, okay.
Are you filming? Okay, gentlemen.
Richard.
1, 2, 3.
Come on in, folks.
And would you like a bobblehead doll?
Hi.
If there were 120,000 Japanese American citizens and their alien parents who were forced into American concentration camps, there are 120,000 stories to be told before we understand the complexities and the impact that the incarceration had on our Japanese American community. So today you will see 5 films and have a look at a kaleidoscope of stories, from a film noir of betrayal and intrigue to the lost stories of our Japantowns that disappeared at the impact when the Japanese Americans were removed, to stories of complex relationships of our young people in camps, and on to stories of giving a face and a name to places we see every day but have no idea of the contributions that the Japanese Americans made on that place, like HAKONE Gardens. So I would like to introduce an esteemed guest that's in the audience with us today. It's historian Connie Young-Yu. Connie? Thank you. We have a very prominent moderator in the room as well. Robert Handa is with us. He will moderate Q&A and the panel. So at the end of the films, will you please stay in your seat, because we will have a very robust discussion about these films and have a discussion with our filmmakers. And so if we can just sit back and let the power of storytelling change our thinking about who we are and how we are in the world today. So thank you.
Instructions to all persons of Japanese. Instructions to all persons of Japanese ancestry. Instructions to all persons of Japanese. Instructions to all persons of Japanese ancestry.
What a journey they took us on for about an hour and a half. We want to thank them for giving voice to our community to be heard and seen through their lived experience. And thank you again to help us reclaim and unearth our Japanese American incarceration stories and the devastating effects on the existing Japantown pre-World War II, from vibrancy to non-existence, and to help us put a face to our humanity and our nation's narrative. So thank you so much. Moderator this evening is Robert Handa. He's an Emmy-winning award reporter from NBC Bay Area and has produced New Magazine, the documentary for PBS, for 3 years. We'd like to thank Robert for his continued highlighting our festival. He is diligent about informing the public about Asian American production and events, and is also a willing participant, as he is again today our moderator.
Well, thank you very much for being here. I echo all the sentiments that she expressed just now in terms of saluting these people here who are with us today. They are doing so much on so many different levels. First and foremost, just trying to be an artist in this day and age is not an easy thing. It's a very admirable thing to do. But then to also tell stories, and the kind of stories that they're telling, it's so important, because not only I felt like my family was interned during World War II, and I felt like I knew a lot about things. And to watch these films, I learned and felt something new with every single film. And so it was really a great experience to do that. And I think that that's what's so important, is that, I don't know, film is kind of posterity. and it's going to be there for people, and it's not going to be just a history lesson for people, but they get to feel the emotions and see the real people behind what was happening. And that's what film, the power of film can do, and that's why I really salute filmmakers and people and historians and all the people that are trying to make sure that these kind of things aren't forgotten. And on Asian Pacific America, my show, we do a lot of topics related to internment because I really do believe that it is something that can be forgotten. It's so big, it's such a big issue in the community, and yet it can be forgotten. And at one point, I think that it almost was. And ironically, it was through art and historians and people who kept it alive, and then it was real life, and people really seeing that this could happen, whether it was to Muslim Americans or to other groups, and suddenly internment of Japanese Americans became relevant, not only as something that happened in history, but also something that could happen now. It is one of those things that I didn't realize that we were going to have basically a half an hour with these filmmakers and stuff, because I could do a half hour with each one of them. So, but it is, we're in a festival schedule, SHIKATA GA NAI. The people watching by now know what that means. Let's go really quickly down the line here. I want to introduce the artists here. First of all, Jason Yamamoto, the director for When You Leave. Jason. Kevin Kodama for SHIKATA GA NAI. Tom Huang, The Loyal Betrayal. Curt Fukuda, HAKONE Gardens and Executive Order 9066. And Barre Fong and Koji Lau Ozawa for SONZAI. All right, we have to go into festival mode here. So first of all, let's start with kind of the order that we saw the films. Jason, give me an idea here for When You Leave. First of all, there was some really great, I love the dynamic with the family involved, you know, the brother and sister, and the mom was a significant character too, in the way that she played in that role. When I was watching it, feeling of loyalty and the feeling of the two friends and what was happening. In fact, loyalty pledge was something that was an aspect that was kind of forgotten by a lot of people, and it was so significant because it forced people to kind of no-win situation. So Jason, first of all, give us an idea here in terms of not only what inspired you to do this movie, and the storyline that you picked and the kind of characters. Why was it something that you wanted to put on film?
Well, thank you so much for having me. The story is loosely inspired by my grandfather's story, growing up in Mendocca in Idaho. And so it's a story that I wanted to tell for a while. It's a story that he wasn't too vocal about until later on in his life, and he passed away in 2012, and so these stories kind of got lost with him. So I definitely wanted to keep it alive and share the story in that capacity. I'm sorry, what was the other?
Well, in terms of what inspired you to kind of take the storyline the way you did, because for me, the aspect of somebody not wanting to leave or being reluctant to leave was like an element that, in my mind, almost I hadn't really thought of in a way. I mean, you just sort of automatically thought, hey, somebody in camp wants to get out. And so to see the character struggling with the idea, and of course the reality he faced out on the farm working as a laborer, but just that idea of someone reluctant to leave and trying to turn the barracks into a home with all of his handicraft, what made you decide to do that? And by the way, again, it was a very interesting and original idea.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I guess, so the story was very different. I had a script written around 2017, but it changed a lot when I was ready to make it because the pandemic hit, and so a lot of COVID regulations changed the way I wanted to tell the story. But I think seeing all of the Asian hate that was coming back, it brought a lot of ideas about like, oh, well, why would you want to go out? It's scary out there. There's a lot to be afraid of. And so that kind of definitely shifted the direction of, well, I think this could be an interesting idea of, you know, someone who's battling this, a battle with themselves about, you know, like, well, do I want to risk going back out there into a world that hates me, or do I want to just stay in this prison? I could shape it and decorate it into a way that I can just sort of ignore the problems and continue just living this life that's sort of a lie. And so so that's how I decided to take the story. And it also allowed to explore I think this idea where I think it can be common in the Asian community to like not necessarily be vocal about these problems or fears that you might have, or certain struggles that you're going through, and how by speaking up and reaching out to those around you, you can find the strength to endure adversity and any problems that you might be facing.
Yeah, and I also liked and appreciated how strongly you built the sister character. She could easily have been just a character to sort of play off of his thoughts and his things, and yet she had her own struggles. And in fact, some of her struggles were almost more the feeling, the lack of dignity, the loss of privacy,
right.
That kind of thing really came across through her, and really was a nice contrast with her. Did you deliberately want to make sure that brother-sister kind of dynamic was a strong one?
Yes, definitely. So again, I'm glad that you picked up on that. So like, yeah, so the sister is also having her own internal struggles, and so it's a way to show that everybody that was in the camps had their own sort of battle that they were fighting, and so that's why it's so important for them to connect and have that heart-to-heart to get on the same page and ultimately realize that the way that we're going to get through this is together, not just handling it on your own.
Yes, and finally, I really appreciated the ending, shades of city lights or Manhattan, where instead of a big finish, you're waiting for that acknowledgement by him that he's having a change of heart. A little smile, then the film ends. Nice touch, very nice. All right, and let's go to Hakone Gardens and Executive Order 9066. Written by Connie Young Yu, by the way, who's here. Great to have you here, Connie. And Walton Smith. I MC the, I guess it's the gala for Hakone Gardens. It's one of my favorite places, so I've MC'd their event maybe for the last, 3 or 4 years or something, and so I really appreciate the plan. And one thing I have said there is that it was one of the few places that I would take my grandmother, and she felt like she was like in Japan. And I just remember seeing her sitting on a bench, and she just had this serene look on her face. And I went up and asked her, and she said that. And I just remember thinking, there might not be any other places really, almost in the Bay Area, where you get that. You can get peace and serenity, but that feeling of being home, just that feeling of that coming across. And also I think that came across in this film, in that Hakone Gardens really represented something, really is a great symbol, to a certain extent, almost the ultimate kind of symbol of like Japanese and the Japanese culture and the Japanese American kind of situation and combination. And it was also a little bit more of a documentary, like a historical kind of documentary. Give us an idea in terms of the approach of doing that, and it could have easily been just like the story of the Sasaki family. That would have been almost an easy way to do it. Instead, you tried for a more multi-layered approach, and you can risk a lot by doing that. You can risk making it more complicated for people, yet you chose not to do it that way, and I thought it was a really admirable choice. Give us an idea in terms of with all that you had to work with, what you decided, how you decided the approach that you would take.
The approach was really grew out of copies and script. They made it so easy for me. It was like I had a roadmap, and all I had to do is just follow it. And if I followed it, everything would come out all right. Plus, the people who I interviewed told such powerful stories that everything just fell in line. And they, to be quite honest, putting the film together was so easy for me because everyone else provided everything for me, including my son who did the music.
Yes, by the way, yeah, Richard, nice job with the music on that. Give me an idea here, the multi-storylines and the different people. I mean, first and foremost, you're right, the testimony by the people, the different people involved in it, really did help tell the story. But there was probably a lot to choose from,
Yes.
And also to visually, I really appreciate the fact that, Hakone is beautiful, and you have to be kind of careful on how you select your imagery there, because you can convey a beautiful picture that may not convey the mood that you want to do. Tell us about that kind of creative process for you.
Right. Actually, the film was created more for intimate viewing, more on a TV monitor, and so to see it today on this giant screen was kind of overwhelming. In fact, I kept saying, oh my gosh, I should have picked a different font for the credits or the subtitles. But, you know, it was going through the footage and listening to the stories, and because the stories were so emotionally charged, it was very easy to pick out what I used. You know, at first, when Connie first gave me the script and I was reading it, I was a little confused because of the multi-layered approach, rather than just talking about the Sasaki family. But after I interviewed everyone, it became clear.
Also, the Sasaki family is sort of a happy ending story. I mean, despite the fact that it was such a traumatic thing for them, I almost got like teared up. I've heard the story before too, but just the idea that they had something to come back to. And then not only did they have something to come back to, they had something to come back to that was something of theirs, not restarting, but being able to resume the life that they had. Really kind of gave it a nice positive center, didn't you think?
Yes.
And I also have to say too, because I watched all the films online, like I'm sure a lot of you did, and then I was really looking forward to seeing it on the big screen. And first of all, I thought, well, the big screen's going to help this because the scenery was so good. But I will say that for all of the films, you know, you should go back and watch them again, as well as have your friends watch them, because it doesn't really, they're so story and character oriented. It doesn't really lose anything by watching it online. I love the movie experience, and that does add something. You can't help it. It does add something. But each of these stories were so solid and so touching that it really doesn't lose that much by watching it online like that. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
All right, well, Curt was talking so much about how easy it was for him to put this film together that I thought that maybe SONZAI might have been almost the opposite in that, because talking about like what could have been, what should have been, a community that was kind of lost. This is so difficult because you're really asking people not only to like imagine sort of what was there, but also feel the loss that it's not there anymore. And it was a little painful to listen to them talking about how much they're trying to preserve the area, but the Nihonmachi was not really one of them. And if it wasn't for efforts like yourself to try to do that, I think it could easily be lost. And also, to be quite honest, if you'd have told me Santa Barbara was a place where there was a Japanese American community, I would have been surprised, you know? So because of those kind of great goals, but all the kind of obstacles, including when you're trying to make a film, and some of the things that aren't there, and the things you're trying to dig up, give us an idea in terms of what made you want to tell that story, why it was important to tell that story, and then you know, you had the archaeological kind of perspective to kind of lean on, but trying to tell the story that way.
That's a great question, Robert. Thank you. When Koji and I first started talking about his project, you know, archaeology was at the center, and that's in itself fascinating. And he said, you know, let's not try to focus so much on incarceration because there's so many great films, obviously being still made and in the past. But as I started listening to the stories and looking into the history, it's unavoidable.
Yes.
The erasure is incredible,
Yes.
and it's so thorough. As you said, if you drove through that neighborhood and you didn't know any history, you would never ever know, except for the exhibit that's inside the Presidio now. But you would never know. There's no plaque, there's no statue, there's no street sign. So I think it led us to that, right? Which is, we could talk about the archaeology, which is fascinating, but you have to not ignore incarceration. It was so pivotal in the history of that community.
Yeah, and just to sort of build off what Barry was saying, I think the idea of archaeology as providing that anchor, that presence, and SONZAI means existence in Japanese, helped to really mark the presence of this community that was erased, that does have no physical traces left on the surface, But then when we sort of dig down beneath the surface, that's where those stories come out. And that's where we were able to really try to help capture that. And overlaid, trying to produce this through the pandemic. We started this in 2019, and many of the interviews we had to do were over Zoom. And I think trying to get to that story with these barriers was a big challenge, and Barry was really creative and fantastic in trying to think about how to put the movie together under those circumstances.
Yeah. And also you made the archaeological digs part of the story, you know what I mean, and things, and also too, it was almost a little bit painful because it was a little bit like Reiko was talking about in her film in terms of how little there is to salvage, you know what I mean, and you have to salvage what's there, and sometimes it's the little everyday items that were found in like trash pits, you know what I mean, and yet now, because they're the remnants of what's left, they become significant. When you went digging, what were you hoping to find? Did you think that you would find as much or as little as you did?
Yeah, so the archaeology there is largely focused on this Presidio period, and so most of the excavations at Santa Barbara really focus on the sort of Spanish colonial history. And just being able to find pieces of everyday life there was astounding. And the cache of materials, the whole pots and bowls, that was really striking to be able to see this assemblage of materials that spoke to these community gatherings at the Buddhist temple, and these everyday interactions that happened in Japantown that no longer exists. I think that was really incredible for me to put my hands on those objects and connect to the history in that way.
Did you decide to shave after you finished the dig? Felt more like an archaeologist when you're digging. Barry, give me an idea. The descendants, many of them still in Santa Barbara. They must have been quite grateful to have somebody trying to resurrect that memory, because they must have thought that that was going to be just some distant memory that would never be, brought out. And so to have them see that, and unfortunately with the pandemic and things like that, some descendants did not make it to get to see everything that they helped revive. Give us an idea, though, in terms of those people that were there. How important was this for them to have their basic hometown community brought back to life?
Yeah, absolutely an honor to meet those people. The graciousness after having survived that kind of life was amazing to me, and obviously there are hundreds or thousands of stories that still need to be told. An aging population that I think we have to be aware of for filmmakers, that we have a chance to capture family members. We should be doing that on film or audio. And I think there was some gratitude, but what was amazing to me was I felt like this was the first time that they had been actually able to share these stories. In fact, Connie and I made a film about San Jose Chinatown, and this woman was telling us about how she lost her baby immediately after moving into the camp because of the diet. So they couldn't digest the food. And she told me afterwards, she grabbed my hand, she's in her 90s, and said, "I've never told anybody that story."
Yeah.
And that, I just choked up, and I couldn't believe that, someone had to hold that in for so long. So
yeah, I saw those parallels with the Chinatown documentaries too that Connie Young did. It was well done, and I'm sure they were very grateful.
Yeah.
Let's go to SHIKATA GA NAI, the movie, as opposed to the line. And Kevin, just a very interesting concept. And I saw Russian Doll recently too, by the way, and so that was to see the time repeating itself, and also too, just not like Groundhog Day. You know what I mean? Each one was so layered and everything. Did that come to you immediately in terms of the best way to kind of do this? Because I noticed that you did it in conjunction with the two actresses as well.
Yeah, a large part of that, part of the story was from going to Manzanar and doing a location scout. I did a couple, so I went in June, last year, and was just going for research, wanted to feel, I knew I wanted to shoot on Manzanar, so I just wanted to get the feeling of the area and what that was going to be like. And one thing that was kind of overpowering was just this feeling of an empty presence, there was something missing, or there was ghosts or spirits, and so I wanted to incorporate like an element of like ghosts and like recurrence and stuff, and trying to like reconcile like a broken past.
Yes, and they got separated because of how they answered the questionnaire, and so this movie was a lot about forgiveness, huh? But
yeah,
it was about reconciling the feelings that what you did separated friends.
Right. Yeah, and I think that was kind of touched upon in other films and stuff, like the whole staying and leaving, and like people being like stubborn to their convictions and like what they believe in and stuff like that. So that was like a huge part of like the characters and how I built them out.
Yeah, I loved it too. Is it time for us to leave? And then the book of quotes. Right. Very nice, very nicely done as a filmmaker. Tom, let's talk about your film noir. Yeah. I'm a big Elmore Leonard fan, so and of course I've seen this done in other ways. It's so fun to watch it in a sort of an Asian-oriented kind of story. And so, first of all, everybody remembers it was the last one we saw. So, what started for you in terms of the story that you picked? And the loyalty, and that being such a big theme, but also too how you decided to do it this way.
Well, I've always wanted to do a period piece with Asian Americans being Asian Americans, and not like you always see like films about the Revolution time or times in the 1900s when the Chinese came here. But those are all immigrants, which I think are big stories. But I wanted to show Asian Americans as Americans back in that time. And so I was kind of trying to figure out what that might be, and I went to Manzanar. If you haven't gone, I'm guessing a lot of you have, but if you haven't gone, it's just amazing. The visitor center there, the barracks setup that you saw in his film. And I remember going through the displays and seeing all these pictures that you see here in these documentaries of all these people, and they're all dressed in the style of the time. They were all young and happy and vibrant, and when I saw them, I saw Americans. I did not see Japanese Americans. I said, wow, these are a bunch of Americans, and they were imprisoned here. And it got me a little choked up, is like looking at these pictures, because I started imagining, like, what if that was me? I happen to be Chinese American, but it could very easily happen to us as well, of course. I got really a feeling of desperation. I got feelings of vandalism, which are all themes of film noir. And that's when I'm like, oh wow, just having to do this can drive someone to a real dark place. Yeah. And so that's where it started. I'm a big fan of film noir, a big fan of the history of it. And so I really thought it would be great to do like a classic Humphrey Bogart type of film noir. It's just that everyone that stars in it are Japanese Americans as opposed to white Americans.
It's a risk, right? I mean, it's just like you love the style, and you have to be careful how you do it because it has to still ring with that sincerity. Even though it's so that the style doesn't overwhelm the content and things like that. I also love the way when you talked about this could happen again, so we have to be careful. You work that into the narrative at the narration at the end, which is really nice.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Was it tough to find the right person to kind of pull off that character? Tim was perfect.
Because like you said, it's like there's a fine line of like being satire or being like being serious. I actually me and my filmmaker friend Koji Sakai, who actually also curates at times at the Japanese American Museum in Los Angeles. We worked on the script together, and so this was actually a short version of it, a proof of concept. So I wanted to see how that played. And it was interesting because we played at a festival in San Francisco where it was not primarily Asian American, and I think at first, and I think it was a younger generation too, and it was packed. And I think at first people were like, "Why are people talking like this?" And then like when they started getting into it, and then they started yelling at the screen like, "Oh my God, no!" It's like that's where I realized that it can work. It's a style. But find those actors. Both those actors, Patrick Keiji and Tim, they're stage actors, and so they really watch films. And I told them to watch Double Indemnity. That's what I was basing it on, and they kind of pick up the cadence, and so they really got into it. And I think it was important for me that they understood what I was going for. I think that when we do someday, if we hopefully do the future, I want to do black and white in the style as well. There's just some ways that I think I need to tweak it a little bit, but this was good to see it with people and see it on a big screen to see how it works.
Yeah, and especially, to me, I always never think of it as black and white, but shades of gray kind of thing, because it really is, there's a lot of depth in that. Speak for all the filmmakers here as we wrap up here, because you have a little bit more experience. How can people help filmmakers? What's the best way for somebody who's watching it, appreciates what they're saying, they don't really know how to help? What's the best way for people who are film buffs and people who are members of the community who want to? What's the best way to help a filmmaker?
I think, first of all, come to these festivals, support this festival like you guys are doing. So thank you very much for coming out and seeing these films. Especially in the theater, when we all get to see it with reaction and see it with people are being moved by it, it makes us realize that we've done something that can inspire people and move on. So keep coming to these festivals. This festivals, the other Asian American festivals around, or indie film festivals. When you keep coming and supporting those, that allows us a place to have, show our voice and show what we're trying to do. It's a little tougher with shorts because there's distribution for shorts is a little harder, but like with my last film, the open night film, Dealing with Dad, I tell people that the way you can help filmmakers is to like get on their mailing lists and like come up to them and say keep us informed about where you're going with your films and where we can see it, where we can show other people to see it. That helps too, because then you're able to spread the word and tell people where they can see the films in other places.
That is a great advice. Take a look at the films. When you enjoy it, try to make a connection with the filmmaker, and then try to let them, help them help you, that kind of thing. So help them.
And there's one small thing too, like, I think all of us get help from a lot of small donors to get the film, right? It's not just like one grant or one thing that's gonna do it. So, if you really want to, help, if you know a filmmaker and you have a little bit, a little bit of something to contribute to the next film, whether it be money or even like catering or food or anything, tell them. I'd like to help you on your next project. That stuff, it takes a village. It takes a community. I know these stories are important to you. If you want to see the stories that are not seen very often, we need your support to get that.
All right, do what you can, but for now, let's start off with some applause for the filmmakers. Very nice to present all of you.
I'd like for you to stay a minute because we're going to thank Robert. Robert, thank you for your professionalism and your patience and your skillfulness to work under these time constraints. You really did a great job.
I didn't know it was going to be a half an hour.
Your ability to mind from these gentlemen here under that time constraint, the information that you were able to pull from them is exceptional.
It's their ability as filmmakers that made it easy for me.
And thank you, Jason and Kevin and Tom and Curt and Koji and Barry. I didn't realize all of you, maybe 2, 4, 5 of you are from the Bay Area or represent the Bay Area. And Jason, we're going to adopt you into the Bay Area. Torrance is not that far away. So I want to thank all of you. We didn't get to the Q&A, but guess what? They'll be waiting for you out in the lobby to take photos with you, but more than that, to take your questions. So please follow them out, and we want to thank you again. Your story and your voice, to give voice to our stories is invaluable. It's about reclaiming, and it's about unearthing, and it's about giving voice to and being heard and seen. So thank you so much. And lastly, I want to say we have 2 surveys we would like you to participate in. One is from Silicon Valley Creates. It's very, very important because they need to know what is the impact, what is the economic impact of the arts. And they need to hear from you, so we would like to help them. And they are one of our biggest art supporters in San Jose and in Santa Clara County. So please, there are 2 people out there, they're walking around with clipboards. Fill out their surveys for them, please. And thank you again, and please let our filmmakers leave first and then follow behind, and they'll be waiting for you. So thank you so much.